a completely worthless car. Who in their right mind is going to buy it? Welcome back to Fuel Up Classic. Now, I don't say this very often, but I think it's well worth me mentioning straight away at the start of the video. I was wrong about the Land Rover Freelander 1. This is a car that I have always considered, up until very, very recently, the worst Land Rover ever made. And I don't think I'm alone in having those thoughts about this particular model of Freelander. However, let me explain to you why I have just sold my perfectly dependable and extremely reliable Toyota Hilux pickup truck and purchased this Freelander 1 for just £800. And let me go a little step further with that and tell you why, if you are a classic car enthusiast that has multiple different cars, why having a car like this for sub £1,000 could just be one of the best purchases that you ever make. So you may well be wondering, why on earth would you part with your hard-earned money to buy a car that you've never liked in the first place? Well, the fact that this car is sat on my driveway is mostly through circumstance, but also through a couple of steps. Take a few steps back for a moment and I'll tell you why I bought one. Prior to this, I was driving my Toyota Hilux pickup on a daily basis, loyal, dependable, everything you'd expect from a Toyota. But I'll be perfectly honest with you, over the thousands of miles I did with it, I didn't really gel with it. At first, it was a very practical vehicle for what I needed from a car. But actually, as time went on and how things changed from what I needed from a vehicle, it actually became a really impractical, lumbering pickup truck that I just didn't need, was worth quite a bit of money, and I thought, it's time for this to go. The car sold within 6 hours of going on the market. That's how hot property some Hiluxes are, and mine was a good example. So that car went, but the surprise factor of how quickly it sold left me in a bit of a sticky situation. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you will know that I own a number of classic cars, but it's perhaps polite to say that not all of them lend themselves well to daily usage. And by that I mean chucking the muddy dogs in the back after a walk, going to the tip, just getting to work on 9 o'clock in the morning on a winter's day when it's snowing and it's not very nice weather. Well, I'm probably not going to take my 40-year-old Jaguar or my old 50-plus-year-old MGs or anything like that for that sort of journey. I needed a car in a hurry, and traditionally that's always the worst time for buying a car. So there we go. This car was very local to me. I purchased it for just £800 and I had absolutely no expectations of it whatsoever. I thought if I get a few months out of it, I will throw it away and I will close that chapter for good. Having said that, I'm now 3 months into ownership, 3,000 miles, and I find myself rather liking it. In fact, I find myself enjoying it far more than I ever did my Hilux, a car that was probably worth about 20 times the value of this. But this drives better. I know that's going to upset a few Toyota fans at home there, but let me show you what less than £1,000 buys you in a Land Rover Freelander 1. Expectations of a sub £1,000 Land Rover, well, they should be incredibly low, shouldn't they? And they were for me. But this car was so local, and I just thought, what's the worst that can happen? We'll go and have a look. If it's rubbish, I'll walk away. If it's any good, well, perhaps we can come to a deal. And that's basically what happened. But on the surface of it, this is actually not a bad car. It's a 2006 facelifted version, which meant they put chunkier bumpers on it, different headlights, refreshed it. It was getting a little bit long in the tooth by 2006, the original Freelander. But it also meant on this particular car, there were some real strong signals that actually this had been a properly maintained vehicle. First things first, the prop shaft is still attached on this vehicle. Anyone that is a seasoned Freelander enthusiast will know that so many of these have been basically lashed up to be just two-wheel drive only. This one isn't. It is still four-wheel drive. It is as it left the factory. And also, there was some evidence it had been properly maintained in the past as well. And the elderly couple that had the car had owned it for some time, and they had also decorated it with a number of National Trust membership stickers. Now, when you've bought and sold cars throughout the years, you tend to find that when you get a National Trust membership sticker or a charity sticker and it's an elderly owner that's getting rid of the car, not always, but most of the time, they look after their cars. There is always an element of going with your gut when you're parting with your money to buy an old car. And that's what I did with this. It wasn't a lot of money. I didn't have high expectations, but the fundamentals were there that this might be a decent example. And there's a couple of things inside as well I want to show you before we take it out for a drive, because the Freelander one's got a couple of neat little tricks up its sleeve, which I had never appreciated before owning one. One of the pleasant surprises with this car is how well spec'd it is. I mean, I've got air conditioning, heated seats, electric windows all round, which as of this week now all work. They didn't at first. The electric mirrors work, the electric sunroof works. I mean, what more do you want from a little cheap runaround than all of those things? And yes, it's a little bit cheap and nasty in here in places. The center console, I don't know where they've sourced this from, but listen to that. It's all creaky and cheap, nasty plastic, but hey ho, what does it matter? The rest of it is actually quite well laid out. It's quite durable. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but the seats are incredibly comfortable. Half leather on this, half sort of suede in the middle. And actually for general running around, chucking stuff in, you'll have to forgive me, I've not cleaned this car inside or out for the video. It is exactly as it gets used on a daily basis. But it's practical, it's kind of utilitarian, which is what you expect from a Land Rover, but there's a few of those mod cons that you'd like to see as well, which is a pleasant surprise, even more of a pleasant surprise that they actually all work this many years on. Let me show you the Freelander one's party trick, and I honestly thought this was always a gimmick with these, but no matter a 3-door or a 5-door version, all Freelander ones came with an electronically operated rear window. And what that means is you can actually drop the whole rear window down. Now, if you've got dogs like we've got that love to stick their heads out the window when you're going down a country road and get fresh air, this is fantastic. They love it. And we're also in the middle of doing a fairly substantial house renovation at the moment, hence why the seats are down on the back of this car, and I'm basically using it like a small van. And what that's meant is all the trips to the builder's merchants or to go and get bits of wood and everything else, I drop that rear window down and it's super practical. I can get all sorts in here, long pieces of timber, everything else that I couldn't get in my pickup truck or couldn't get in a normal car, I can get in this. So it's already proving its worth to me as just a general multi-purpose vehicle, which I suppose in many ways is what Land Rover had in mind when they designed it. So we've taken the Freelander one out for a drive, and I do fully appreciate this isn't going to be the most exciting of cars that I've featured on the channel, but it does represent a really good example of Bangernomics, running a car for less than £1,000. What are the ups and downs of that process? Well, for me, let me talk about the ups first, because this car has been, on the whole, a pleasant surprise. It's a car that's enabled me to sell my Toyota Hilux, which, if I'm being brutally honest with you, it's a car that on paper, everyone tells you they're absolutely fantastic. They're the best car ever made. Toyota, legendary build quality. And that all may be true, but I just didn't ever gel with it. It was just a quite boring, bland pickup truck that didn't excite me at all, and also was quite high value, and I just didn't need it. That was my personal reasons to get rid of that car. In steps this Freelander 1, a car that I'd always hated, and I thought, well, worst case scenario, it'll be a little bit of entertainment for the channel. When I buy this and it goes horribly wrong, I'll do a video on it and I'll go, well, I've lost some money, but we'll move on from that. But actually, 3 months in, it's exceeded my expectations. It's not been a faultless journey by any means. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I've had one breakdown in this car in 3,000 miles, and that was a split turbo hose, quite common on these, as I've later found out. Nonetheless, I limped the car home, ordered the part on eBay, 20 quid, arrived the next day, fitted it on the driveway, a little bit awkward to do, and we were back up and running again. So it was a breakdown, but not really anything drastic. We sorted it out quickly and we were back on the road. That has been the only thing to go wrong in 3 months and 3,000 miles. That's not bad going for an £800 car, is it? Let alone a Land Rover, and we all know they don't have the best reputation for reliability. You know, if you watched the channel before, some of my classics, or when I had that Bentley Arnage, when you're using those cars, you're almost worried to park them anywhere. You're worried to leave them in certain places in case they get stolen, or in case they get, you know, bumped into by other drivers, careless people getting in and out, knocking them with their doors, that sort of thing. This car, I couldn't care less. I don't want it to be damaged, but if it was, well, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And that is a completely freeing experience. I just do not care. Because it's such a small value car, it's meant that I've been able to recoup some money that was in that pickup truck that I owned before, start spending on the classics as well, get them up to a better standard, and start enjoying them even more. And in the meantime, this is giving reasonably reliable, practical service. I'm going all over the country picking up parts for the cars, and as I mentioned, we're doing a bit of a property renovation at the moment as well, so it's often just being used as a van for tip runs to the builders merchants, and this car has probably paid for itself in terms of just being so handy several times over already. So that's my reasons why I think running an old banger when you've got classic cars as well can be a really useful tool. But I did make some rookie errors when I bought this car. I bought and sold hundreds of cars over the years, but I can still make the most basic of mistakes. And I did exactly that with this car. I forgot to check what the annual road tax would be on this year of Freelander. What do you think at home that it might be? £300, £400 perhaps? Well, no. As I found out once I'd handed over the money to buy the car, this Freelander sits in the highest tax band. And that means that it's over £760 a year to tax it. Now, when you consider that this car is probably worth about that, that means that I think on the whole, this is, in terms of monetary value, a completely worthless car. Who in their right mind is going to buy it? So that leaves me with a couple of things. What do I do with it? Eventually, it will go wrong and it will probably be uneconomical to repair. But in the meantime, it's chugging along quite nicely. There's some jobs that I probably need to address in the future, but it's doing faithful service. But I thought, at this such a low spend, is there something fun we could do with it? And I want to ask your opinion on that. A Freelander 1 doesn't have the best reputation across the board, but it owes me so little money. Could we take it somewhere? Could we do something with it that puts both me and the car well and truly out of its comfort zone? And if it all goes horribly wrong, well, I haven't lost thousands of pounds in the process, which will be nice. So I do wonder that. The cogs are turning somewhere in my mind that I wonder if we could take this car down to Morocco or something like that, give it a proper test to see just how durable an old, very cheap Land Rover can be. If you are genuinely curious about what it's like to drive a Freelander 1, well, I can tell you now. It's pretty effortless. There's nothing particularly groundbreaking or grin-inducing about it. It's just a car that gets on with the job. The steering is heavy and vague, but on the plus side, performance is adequate. It will sit at 70, 80 miles an hour all day long. It returns about 35 miles per gallon on average, and this diesel engine is pretty good. Once it warms up, it quietens down a little bit. It's reasonably refined. The cabin itself is fine. It's light, it's spacious, it's airy. And this is something that Land Rover always seem to get right. The driving position is spot on. It's up there with the best of them. Believe me, you sit really high, you've got an excellent viewpoint out over the road, plenty of glass, visibility is really good. I think this lighter interior helps lift the cabin a little bit as well. I will go as far to say it's a pleasant place to be. And on the road, it drives more like a car than a roly-poly 4x4. And I guess that's because it's not really a proper mud-plugging 4x4, is it? It's a bit of a baby soft roader. You might take it on the odd dirt track. They're reasonably capable, I believe, if you want to off-road them, but you know, I can't be bothered with any of that. I use it on the road 99% of the time, and it's doing a perfectly adequate job at everything. So, on the whole, buying a cheap Freelander 1, a car that I am very happy to admit I previously had always slated, never liked, and probably go as far as hated. I always thought it was one of the worst cars to come out of Land Rover ever. But with time, with thousands of miles now under my belt, I can say if you're after a cheap, reasonably reliable, very practical car that's actually got a little bit of character about it, I would recommend a Freelander 1 to somebody. They're all right. It's a decent car, drives well, body rolls pretty good, by the way. It doesn't roll around like an old Discovery or a P38 Range Rover. It's not going to excite you on a daily basis, but if you just need a car, and especially if you've got other classic cars that you want to enjoy, having a cheap old banger like this to do all the donkey work is exactly what should be in your lineup.